Hello.
Hi.
So, professionally, I consider myself an ecologist. I study organisms, mainly animals, and how they interact with other organisms and their environment. And I came to this organically because the questions scientifically that interest me are the ones that require looking beyond just individuals to how they interact with other individuals, and as well as how they interact with individuals even from other species. And it's well known in biology that these interactions are very important. So for example, it's very different if an organism is trying to find food if a predator is around or if there are no predators around. A big difference there. So in my mind, it is extremely important to understand the workings of the biological community, all the different species that interact. So human communities, that's my subject today, they're defined differently. So our communities are the people who we interact with, and we share some kind of characteristic. But I think they're also quite similar to the biological sense of the term. So I've come to realize that understanding community, especially in the human sense, is also very important in my life. As Unitarian Universalists, we are active in our communities. We try to be the hope, we try to be the goodness in the world, and we hear about examples here in the church every week from our fellow congregants. But today, I'm going to focus on something a little different, a little more of the individual level of community. We are all integral parts of our communities, and I want to focus on our interactions, how we support each other, and how we get supported. Our community, our communities, are a critical part of ourselves, which I think is important to appreciate in order to actually live our best lives. The underlying concept that I want to talk about today actually goes back to what Amanda talked about last week, about filling our cups. So to reiterate, our cups, they hold our mental, emotional, and physical energy. We both give this energy to others, and we receive this energy from others. And this is through our interactions. We need to keep our cups full enough that we actually have enough energy to give. Otherwise, we can't give. And if we keep our cups full, then we can actually live the UU principles, in addition to keeping ourselves mentally, emotionally, and physically well. This is similar to the rekindling sparks of our opening words today. Just as our inner flames can be sparked by others, likewise we can provide the spark to encourage the light of another, but only if we have enough spark to actually give. When I first learned about this concept in our foster parent classes, it was one of those things that it just kind of stuck with me. It just seemed right. And I started to really look at my life in this kind of framework. So how I'm living now, how I approach my life, and looking back, how I have lived my life and how I got to where I am today. I think this is an especially important concept for this particular congregation. Many of us here are givers, and we need to keep filling our cups so that we remain able to give. If we are conscious of these kinds of dynamics, we can try to ensure that we focus on keeping a good balance in our lives. We keep enough energy coming in so that we can have it go out. I've been thinking more and more about the many communities I've been a part of throughout my life, and the more I think, the more apparent it is that the rekindling spark of others is really have been a huge influence in my life. We all need that spark, and we can all be that spark for others. Different communities are important for many different reasons and can provide many different kinds of sparks. Fill our cups in different ways. I've been a part of many communities in my life. I lived in the same house for my first 23 years, then began to bounce around as I pursued my career. So this variety of communities has definitely kept life fresh, changing every few a few years, but it has also made things kind of challenging at times as we have to kind of continually restart, continually join and move through new communities. My family has always been there. I'm lucky to have that, but it's really the communities that I'm a part of where I'm actually living that kind of provide that day-to-day spark for me. So my first community away from home was in Kentucky. That was populated with a rotating cast of fellow graduate students as people moved on and were replaced by new students every year. And it was a stressful time for all of us. Grad school, we had high expectations, high workloads, and it was something that most of us had never done before. So it was a trying time for sure. And I would not have graduated if it was not for my fellow students. We were there for each other. My family was there for me, but they were in a different state, phone calls, not texts at the time, but we talked on the phone, made occasional trips, but really in my day-to-day life, it was my community of those other graduate students that got me through everything, including my wife. So just very few of us within that community had family nearby, so we became a sort of family, all within ourselves. We were all in similar situations, the same stressful graduate school situation, most of us fairly far away from our families, our immediate support systems. And on top of that, I think really the understanding of the context in which we were living was especially important. These were people who were seeing what everyone else was going through on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes, in our day-to-day lives, a random act of kindness, that can be our spark, that can lift us up. But sometimes you really, really need someone who knows what you are going through in order to really help you out. So depending on the day, all of us students would provide energy, receive energy, and frequently both, sometimes in the span of an hour. And sometimes we needed encouragement, sometimes commiseration, and sometimes just someone who was listening, who was willing to listen to us vent, or even just provide some quiet company as we thought. We were there for each other in our collective trials, made for a very tight group because of our interdependence. So eventually, we graduated, it took a while, but we moved to Indiana to start new research jobs, so another new state. And essentially, we had to start over again with another new group of strangers. Shortly after arriving, we were actually invited out to dinner by one of Amanda's new lab mates and her husband. We went to dinner, and what I really remember from that is just the feeling of welcome that I felt. So it was a pretty small gesture, we just went out and ate tacos together, but it really just kind of set the tone for our time that we had in Indiana. So I'm still very, very thankful for how they actually reached out to us. And we very quickly became integrated into the new communities of our respective research labs. These labs are really nice that way. So you have this relatively small group of people that you're working with on a daily basis. You see them for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. You hang out with them at night. You talk about the same things. You learn about the same things. You have the same passions. So it's nice in that way that we kind of have a built-in community, all of our stops along the way so far. And again, these interconnected communities, these were so important to us. We were able to nurture others as they nurtured us. And it was an interesting transition for us because our roles in the community had changed. We still had the same roles that we had when we were graduate students. We were still helping others, they were still helping us, but we also took on mentoring roles. We were kind of the professional scientists in this context. And while our own successes fueled us, really for the first time, I was able to feel that sense of pride, that uplifting that comes with helping a junior colleague, help them succeed, help them go to their first conference and speak to a room full of people, help them grow and make their own life, make their own career. So then, after a few years in Indiana, we moved to Sioux City, and once again, we started completely from scratch. Our first community here was colleagues at Morningside College, where I still work. And here, it was a different dynamic. I didn't come into a research lab, I came into a department, so I had a few people that I was around on a day-to-day basis. But it was, you know, all the other faculty, they were all doing kind of their own things. And we were quite slow to integrate into that community. Initially, Amanda was working from home and really had no connections in this area. And I was myself. I was a minimally social introvert and just trying to keep up with my first full-time professor job. Didn't want to disappoint my students, didn't want to disappoint my colleagues, my bosses, anybody else. So we had things on our minds that we were worried about. But then, well, integration into the community was kind of forced on us. My grandfather passed away just about a month into my first semester here. So I think that looking back, most of my new colleagues really had no idea that this, or really much of anything, was going on in my life because I wasn't yet close enough with anybody to actually tell them. So I ended up reaching out to another new faculty member that I talked to a little bit, and she lived nearby, and we asked her to take care of our lovely little cat while we traveled back to Ohio. And she readily agreed to help us out. And I remember at the time actually feeling a sense of surprise there, because I didn't really know too many people here. I certainly didn't know her very closely, but here she was. She would come over and take care of our cat, look after our apartment, make sure everything was okay. And I remember feeling that sense of gratitude from that gesture. And since then, I've tried to really be that person in that Morningside community. Especially the new faculty members that join us there every year. I try to reach out, I try to be that welcoming presence for everyone. And again, as with my other academic communities I've gone through, we are in a situation where few of us faculty members actually have family very nearby. And again, we kind of sort of develop into our own very large family group. So we've kind of coalesced around that idea once more. So as we were getting started, there was definitely a community already there. And it was just waiting for us to join, to be integrated. And in order to do that, it definitely took effort on both of our parts. I had to push past my introversion and reach out more. Spend more time actually chatting in the halls with my colleagues rather than just immediately rushing back to my office after classes and working on the next thing on my list of stuff to do. So I started very intentionally. I wouldn't just say hello and scatter on down the hall, but stop and chat for a few minutes, get to know people, ask them questions, respond with more than yes or no when they ask me questions. And it was difficult at times. It made me very uncomfortable. I went and I sat in different places in faculty meetings near different people. I went to presentations and workshops all around campus that I really had no interest in. I just wanted to kind of meet some people. And it worked, and it was worth it. I got to know a lot of people really fairly quickly, and that really was big in helping us to feel comfortable here in Sioux City with this community. So those people have shared some of my highest moments that I've had in my life, and they've helped me through some of the lowest points that I've had in my life, and I've been able to return the favor for many of them. We need each other, and I would not be genuinely happy here without that community. I've taken those lessons and I've tried to create a similar sense of community in my classes. Sometimes works better than others, but it's actually been particularly successful in my freshman writing classes. So students come from different backgrounds, different states, different countries, they have different goals, and what I try to do is foster a sense of belonging, a sense of community for them by focusing on their similarities rather than their differences. Most of them are away from home and family, sometimes for the first time. They're living on their own for the first time, trying to figure out just how to keep themselves alive. They're struggling to adjust to college, oftentimes, so I've only taught them in their first semester away, and they're just completely bombarded by information from college and social information, and life is just totally different. And conveniently for me, they're also forced to take a class that they don't want to take and write papers that most of them don't actually care about. So again, we have a great uniting feature there. And I found that this really works in my classes. My students have made friends with people they may have never interacted with otherwise because I forced them to. And I can see them not only help each other get through their first semesters of college, but years later, even at commencement, I see them go up to these people who are, by all appearances, totally different from themselves, and they maintain their friendships. They maintain that support network through their whole times. And what's really interesting to me is that I actually see this in the student comments from classes on the course evaluations. So there's students that mention every semester that I really thought I would hate this class. I didn't want to take it, but I actually enjoyed coming to class. And a big part of that was, not the content, not the writing. They don't care so much about that, but it's the other people in the class. We have this sense of community. It's not all just based on learning things, just based on improving writing. It's also based on supporting each other, providing that network. And that's, I think, one of my bigger successes in teaching. So as we've settled in here in Siouxland, our lives have become enriched by other communities, other foster parents, Amanda's colleagues at Western Iowa Tech, our daughter's classmates and their families, and this church, of course, among others. And I think that this diversity in the communities that we belong to is extremely important. I receive very different sparks from academic discussions with my colleagues, from game nights with Amanda's colleagues, where I don't have to think or worry about work at all, or how my colleagues see me. Just having coffee downstairs after church. But the thing they all share is that they all serve to keep my inner flame going, to keep my cup filled. And I appreciate how each contributes in their own way to my well-being. So I think that faith communities, particularly the Unitarian Universalist community, are critical places for giving and receiving those rekindling sparks that sustain us. These are often among the first communities people join in a new area, and certainly a welcoming congregation will quickly integrate new members. In many religions, sparks seem to come from a particular god or gods, in addition to the actual earthly beings. So if that works for you, then I am thrilled for you, although I have never felt that particular spark myself. I know people who do draw energy from belief in their God, and honestly, I am envious. That must be pretty awesome. For me, and I imagine many UUs, our community, the actual people in our church, serve that same purpose of maintaining the inner flame. I have deep gratitude for this church community. The conversations we have, the sermons we share, the fellowship and love we so often freely give, and the sparks that I feel here every week. Give those sparks to as many people as you can, inside these walls and beyond, however you are able. And remember to graciously accept those sparks from others. We need our communities, and they need us. Thank you.